Yo, what's up guys, it's your boy Sami here. Today we are gonna see, what if Naruto become Agent of Hell, part 2, hope you'll enjoy this video. So before we start please subscribe to our channel, and like this video. So let's get into the video. Above him was a message written in blood. Angel from below, I went and took his soul. An eye for an eye. A soul for a soul. Konoha was abuzz with the news of the Koyama boy's murder. It wasn't the fact that there was a murder in the village that was so shocking, being a military village and all, but the fact that the boy was so young. For Genin, you were considered an adult the moment you accepted your headband, but he wasn't a ninja, he was a sweet innocent 14-year-old civilian studying to become a preacher. Even in the seriousness of the situation, someone, under Naruto's influence, made the offhand remark that the irony was that his savior had died nailed to a cross, but he died nailed with a cross. Even with the people glaring at him, he continued to say, live by the cross, die by the cross, before leaving the man confused and surrounded by glaring mourners. Naruto busied himself by framing people for the murder, watching, as the police would bust into their worker home, loudly state that they were under arrest for the murder, then drag them off to be interrogated by the torture and investigation division. He had so much fun watching, as civilians were grilled for hours by investigators, before a ninja from the Yamanaka clan was brought in to check their mind. The look on the investigator's face when the mind walker stated that they were innocent and had no clue as to the murderer's identity was so funny, especially when he was harshly reprimanded by his boss for being wrong. But framing random people wasn't the only thing he did. No, he still had a whole group of people to punish. The new preacher, the man who helped the old preacher organize his exorcism, found himself in a bind. His name was Jinmaru, and he was on trial for a horrendous crime. He sat at the defendant's table nervously wringing his hands. This was wrong, he didn't do what he was accused of, he had been framed. But despite knowing that he was innocent, they had a strong case against him, and evidence that made him look extremely guilty. Your Honor, the prosecutor spoke from his table, we would like to call the victim up to the stand. The prosecutor was a young blonde man with slick back hair. He was dressed in a black suit with a dark red tie, and had a pearly white disarming smile. Dashi could tell he was in trouble, even his court-appointed lawyer seemed nervous. This man had a way with words, he had only given his opening statement, but that alone seemed to cement his guilt. The judge nodded, and the bailiff, a female Anbu, turned to the door beside her that led to a small room, and walked in. She was only gone for a minute before she returned, holding the hand of a small frightened-looking boy with light brown hair, and the greenest, most innocent-looking eyes you'll ever see. She guided him around to the witness chair, and helped him up, before moving to stand beside the door, glaring at the man through her mask, as she passed by. Mr. Renzo, please approach the bench, the judge asked, before he could start. The blonde nodded, and walked up, looking up at the man with his blue eyes. The judge knelt over the desk. He was an elderly man with a white beard, and a bald head. Mr. Renzo, before you start I wanted to remind you of the delicacy of this case. Do not badger this boy, he's been through enough already, and shouldn't have to relive it. Renzo nodded. I understand, Your Honor. The child's comfort has always come before the case, and I thank you for your concern. But it is unneeded, and I'll thank you not to question my ability to do my job, he said with his disarming smile before turning, and walking to step in front of the boy's stand. The blonde gave the boy a kind smile. Hello, my name is Jin Renzo, and I'd like to ask you a few questions, is that okay with you? The boy nodded shyly. Good. Now remember, you don't have to answer any of these questions, if they make you feel uncomfortable, okay? The boy nodded again. Good, you're a very brave boy for doing this. Now, can you tell us your name? Renzo asked gently. Ishiro, he stuttered shyly. Renzo nodded. Well, Yoshino, can you tell us how old you are? The other lawyer jumped up. Your Honor, how are these questions relevant to the case? The judge looked at Renzo. Mr. Renzo, please explain. Renzo nodded and turned, looking at the jury, as well as the others sitting in on the public trial before looking at the judge. Your Honor, I'm simply trying to convey to the jury the seriousness of the crime in which the defendant is charged with. I'm sure that everyone will agree, in a case as delicate as this, all the facts must be presented to the court to ensure that a fair sentence is handed out. In this case I'm sure that the questions I have asked are completely relevant to the case, and that the Mr. Jinmaru's public defendant is only trying to stall, and have you stop my questioning. The judge nodded. Please continue. Renzo nodded, and walked back up to the child. Sorry about that, now can you tell me how old you are? Yoshino nodded slowly. I'm 6.5, he stated proudly, but still looking down shyly. My such a big boy, Renzo said in a kind voice. I almost thought you were 10. His words seemed to make the boy giggle for the first time during the trial. Yoshino, can you tell me, do you recognize anyone here besides your parents? At this the boy looked nervously at Dashi, and slowly pointed at him with his small, shaking hand. I'm Mr. Jinmaru, he's the preacher at Mommy's church. Renzo nodded slowly. I see, and was he the one who touched you? The other lawyer wasn't quick enough to object, as Yoshino burst out in tears, and screamed, yes, he put his thing in me, drowning out the lawyer's yell. Dashi felt his heart drop, as he saw everyone glaring at him. Renzo looked at the jury, then at the boy, who sobbed that he wanted to go home. Your Honor, we both know that the boy is no longer in a state to be questioned. Allow his parents to take him home. He deserves to rest and heal from this atrocity. The other lawyers stood up. I want to cross-examine the boy, Your Honor. Renzo whirled around and glared at the man. He's in no shape to be badgered by you. We heard his testimony, and we don't need you making things harder on him that they already are. Need I remind you that his testimony was only a small part of this? We have documented evidence, pictures, statements from respected doctors that checked him out after what happened, and let's not forget, DNA found inside the victim. Frankly, this trial is just a formality, as the overwhelming evidence leaves no room for reasonable doubt. The blonde watched as the lawyer slowly sat down, quietly withdrawing his statement, much to Dashi's horror. The Anbu walked over, helped the young boy off the stand, and walked him over to where his mother had sat in a chair next to the room they had been in. His father had sat beside Jin Renzo as the plaintiff during the trial, since Yoshino had been too young, saying that his son didn't need to be paraded around and forced to be the center of attention. The jury left the room for only a minute, as if they stepped into the room only to say guilty before walking back out and taking their seats. The foreman stood up. Your Honor, we the jury found Dashi Jinmaru guilty. It didn't come as a surprise to anyone. The case had been so one-sided the whole time that an innocent verdict would have been a miracle. The judge cleared his throat. Mr. Jinmaru, you are found guilty of aggravated sexual assault of a minor, and are be sentenced to serve the mandatory minimum sentence of 25 years in Fire Country's maximum security prison. As his fate was sealed, Dashi covered his face with his hands and began to pray, trying not to look at the glaring people at his trial, and never noticing Jin Renzo's shark-like grin and crimson-red eyes. The bailiff grabbed him by the arm and cuffed his hands behind his back roughly. In her mind, this thing wasn't a man. It took a sick mind to rape a little child, and he deserved everything that came to him. Kaido, the boy's father, let out a sigh as he turned to Renzo. Thank you, Mr. Renzo, he said, holding out his hand. Thank you for doing this for us. Renzo shook it. It's my pleasure, Mr. Kaido. I just wish we met under better conditions. Oh, and don't worry about paying me. People like Jinmaru sicken me. The blonde pulled a pair of sunglasses out from his pocket and put them on his face, before picking up a slim leather briefcase. My work here is done. I hope to never see you again in this room. Kaido watched as the lawyer left the room and disappeared behind the doors. He walked into the room where his wife and child were waiting, giving them both a big hug when he saw them. Is it over? She asked, as the three hugged with tears in her eyes. Kaido nodded. Yes, thanks to Mr. Renzo, that monster will never do such a thing again. He made sure of it. A week later in Fire Country prison. When you think of a prisoner, you think of a hardened thug ready to stab you with a shank at any given time or ass rape you in the shower. Someone with nothing to lose and willing to do anything no matter what. But only a small group of felons were like that. Yes, most would kill you if it came down to a kill or be killed moment. The guards knew this and were trained to deal with them all. The more hot-headed ones were watched closer though, but they'd seen some scary stuff in their line of work. Most prisoners here really didn't get many visitors, so when a guard came over the intercom yelling out for a prisoner 23 to 445-23, aka Ryo, to report in, because he had a visitor, many were surprised. Ryo was a lifer here at the prison, not for what he did on the outside, but for murdering 3 other prisoners. He was a gang member and got checked daily for weapons, but despite that he was a quiet and polite man, never resisting them and doing as he was told. A killer with a heart, they called him. Ryo stood up from his place on the bleachers in the rec yard and walked up to the large metal door where a guard was waiting. The guard checked him for any weapons and let him pass before following him. He started towards the visitors area, but the guard surprised him by calling out to him and leading him another way, towards a door that he had never been through before. On the other side of the door he saw 2 men talking to each other, one he recognized as the warden, but not the other. They were standing not too far away from the tall barbed wire fence that blocked off the rec yard where the prisoners were working out, something that some of the other felons noticed and moved over to see. The other man was a blonde. He was dressed in a black suit and a red tie with a pair of black sunglasses over his face. He held a small package wrapped in brown paper in his hands. He walked closer to the 2. Mr. Ryo, I've been waiting for you, the blonde said before looking at the warden. May I speak with him alone? The warden nodded and walked off. Good. Now Mr. Ryo, I know quite a bit about you, and am in need of your services. I know how you feel about child molesters, and offer you a chance to right a grave wrong. The blonde pulled out a newspaper clipping, and handed it to him, making him grit his teeth at the headline. Now I know you wish to murder him, but I feel a quick and painless death is too easy on him. I believe in the old saying an eye for an eye, so you can see where I'm going with this. The blonde handed him the package. Your friend Kai would be more than happy to help, if the rumors are true. But after which you must stab him in the heart and tell him that Uzumaki Naruto sends his regards. Ryo looked at the package, then at the blonde. What do I get out of this? The blonde smirked. I've already talked it over with the warden. You'll receive a nice amount of money to use in prison. Also, I know how you like to smoke, so I put something special in your package. The warden has agreed to take you off the watch list for a few days, until the deed is done, so don't waste time. Now, have a pleasant day. A few days later, news reached Konoha that Jinmaru had been murdered in prison. Details were sketchy, but they say he had been jumped in the shower, ass-raped, then stabbed in the chest, and left to die. While some of his closest friends and family mourned, those that despise him for what he did to that little boy found themselves thinking that he got what he deserved. No clues as to the murderer's identity were found, and so his file was declared a cold case, and stored among the others just like it. Never to be solved, and doomed to be forgotten. Konoha, Hokage Tower. Noon. Gears and Sarutobi walked up the steps to his office in the Hokage Tower. Despite his old age, stairs weren't a problem for him like most people his age. He had a relatively fit body, and he took care of his joints. He had just finished eating lunch in town, having been ahead in his work for the first time in ages. Stopping for lunch and going out to eat brought back memories of how he used to pick up his wife and son when he was young, then take them any place they wanted, sometimes packing a picnic basket and eating in the park, but not all of them were happy. He had been reminded of how he used to take a certain blonde out to get ramen. How the hyperactive blonde used to eat his own weight in the stuff without gaining a single pound, much to the owner's daughter's amazement and envy. The tower was nearly silent. Most of the normal workers had taken their lunch breaks as well, and any ambu there were usually very well hidden. Reaching the door, he stopped. The two guards that were by his door were gone, his secretary too. She wasn't allowed to leave while he was gone on his lunch break, to accept any papers while he was gone or alert anyone looking for him that he was out. The guards weren't allowed to leave his door unprotected either, at least during the day while he was working. He unlocked his door and stepped in, closing the door behind him. Just look at them. The Hokage turned in shock to see a person standing at the window overlooking the village. He hadn't sensed the person and was instantly on guard. From this distance, most of the people of this village look like ants. How appropriate does it sound? All working together in mass for their masters, even if they don't know it. I think you'd agree that this village could be compared to that of an anthill, surrounded by walls that hide the network of roads traversed by little insignificant insects. Worker ants do, as they instinctively do to keep the shitty walls from collapsing. Soldier ants do the same, protecting said walls. All the while, a large body of fools plot and scheme their way into getting richer and stronger through underhanded tactics of a vile and cancerous body known as a council. Sarutobi fingered a kunai hidden in his robes. How did you get in here? This place is off limits, he demanded while looking at the man. He couldn't make out what he looked like thanks to a black-headed trench coat. The man chuckled. Why, I did the same as you. I just walked on in. And my guards just let you pick my lock without saying anything. Why, of course not. They were very loyal, as was that pretty little thing you hired as your secretary. Sarutobi's eyes narrowed. What did you do to them? He hissed, his voice dangerous and cold. He just hummed, nothing permanent, he stated while waving over to a corner. You can see for yourself if you wish. The old man looked quickly and saw the three people laying against the wall. He started to go and check on them, but the person standing by the window started speaking. As I said, they are in good health, but I must admit, I'm glad to see that you are still alive, old one. It may have been tough to talk to you had your life ended before now. Who are you? He chuckled, and here I thought the great professor was still as sharp as before. I'm almost saddened that you seem to have forgotten me, Gigi. The Hokage felt his heart thump in his chest. Only Konoha and Asuma called him, and both were gone. Asuma had a mission, and Kono was in class. Besides, neither would attack the guards or his secretary to get into his office. Okay, maybe his grandson, but it's not like he'd win. The only other person he knew that would dare call him that, joking or otherwise, was dead, had been for 10 years. The hooded man turned to face him, his eyes hidden under the hood, but not the 6 whisker-like scars on his cheeks or his blonde sideburns. He slowly removed the hood and revealed his spiky blonde hair and piercing blue eyes. It's been a while since I was an old man. Naruto spoke with a small smile. Despite what had happened 10 years ago, as well as his new Minsid, he had never blamed Hiruzen for it, choosing to take it out on the ones who really were to blame. Naruto? Sarutobi gasped out in shock, taking a moment to try and dispel any that this may have been. Naruto smirked. Try all you want, old man, this isn't a dream. I'm alive and kicking. How? When I saw your body, the doctors confirmed that it was you. We buried you with your mother and father so that you'd be together forever. Naruto scoffed. Old man, your conception of the afterlife leaves something to desire. You can bury the bodies together, but your soul may or may not go along with the others. Sarutobi got the hint and paled even more. So you. Naruto nodded. Sure did, old man. I kicked the bucket, croaked, passed on. You get the idea, although I find it amusing that even in death me and my family are destined to be apart. Your old dad's stuck in the Shinigami's gut, mother's lazing around on the clouds. He stopped to let what he said sink in, as well as what he didn't say. The Hokage nearly fainted in shock, realizing what Naruto was implying. How amusing. When I was 6, the people used to call me a hellspawn who knew that they'd get it right. Naruto asked, showing off his pointy grin. How in the hell did a 6-year-old boy get sent to hell? Hiruzen had to ask. Naruto shrugged, looking from the window, and going around the desk to sit in a guest seat, while motioning for the Hokage to sit in his seat. Faced with your own mortality, you suddenly understand everything. Things become clear, almost like opening your eyes after a very long time. In a strange place he stopped, and crossed his legs. I know that you had the man who killed me tortured and hanged, but in truth he was only the mastermind. That Judas priest was only one in 12 people who had a hand in my death, or, as they called it, my exorcism. Sarutobi started to ask their names, but Naruto stopped him. The 12 are being punished. The 2 preachers are now dead, both tortured in some way. Juro by law, and Dashi in the prison shower by a convict that can't stand pedophiles. 2 were killed in a fire, another 3 left the village, and died after being ambushed by bandits, and 4 were captured on their mission to spread the word of God. The 2 men were beaten and tortured for fun, and the women, their wives, were raped to death. Can't say that I care. In my eyes, they got off easy. Sarutobi did the maths, but that's only 11, what about the last? Naruto gave a harsh, hateful grin. Angel from below, I went and stole his soul. Hiruzen pushed back into his seat, horrified. You murdered that? Oh Naruto, please tell me you didn't. The blonde nodded. Indeed I did, old man, but don't worry, despite what those doctors say, the boy's soul had passed on before his body could even realize it. Those say that he died when I snapped his neck, but what most don't realize is that your body can continue to survive without a soul. My father's soulless husk would still be alive had his previous injuries not finished him off. He uncrossed his legs, as they started to fall asleep. But we're getting off track. You asked how I could be sent to hell. The answer is like I said. Before you die things become clear. My anger towards Kami, and her worshippers drove me to curse her name, and sell my soul, condemning me to hell. It was scary at first, but the devil is actually not as bad as you think. He was surprised that a young child such as myself had sold his soul, and, seeing as my only real sin was selling my soul, made it so I wouldn't be tortured for all eternity. He even trained me. And agreed to send me back here, seeing as my life was brutally cut short. He didn't tell him his real goal or the whole truth, just the watered down half-truth. He didn't need the man to know that Lucifer's right-hand man on earth was sitting right in front of him, and that he was planning on sending the world spiraling into chaos. He grinned innocently, the effect ruined by his sharp teeth, and asked, but enough about me, tell me what's happened while I was gone. A few hours later. Wow, things really have changed, Naruto remarked while rubbing his chin with a finger. I was wondering why the 3rd and 4th circles of hell got a sudden influx of Uchiha. I couldn't ask the gluttonous and greedy pigs anything through their moaning and torture though, so I just ignored them. Sarutobi ignores what he just said, still trying to get used to the fact that Naruto had spent most of his life in literal hell, which seemed to be an improvement compared to how the village treated him before. So what will you do now, Naruto? He asked after a while. Do you want to stay and rebuild your clan? Everything was locked away with family seals, so only you can open them. Much to the civilian council and Danzo's anger, I know that people will accept you now that everyone knows the truth. All we have to do is come up with a cover story. Naruto hummed, write up a contract for me to be an independent asset under your command, and no one else's, and I'll happily accept a place here in this village. Also, the council has no say or power over me, and in the event of your death, impeachment or otherwise, the contract must be renewed by both parties, or I have the right to walk away with all my stuff. Sarutobi nodded. During the village's early stages, such a thing was commonplace. Also, I want to be able to pick and choose my missions. Naruto started, only for Sarutobi to chuckle. Actually Naruto, I was thinking along the lines of you being my personal bodyguard. That is after you prove your abilities to the Shinobi Council, so that they don't have to worry about my safety during public functions or diplomatic missions, and to rub it into the civilian council. And Danzo's face, he stopped and gave an evil laugh of his own, making Naruto smirk. Deal. Despite everything, Sarutobi felt that he just made a deal with the devil. After drafting an official contract, Sarutobi gave it to Naruto to read. Basically it stated that Naruto would be Hiruzen Sarutobi's chief bodyguard during any public function, such as speeches or any time where he was out in the streets during things like festivals. He would also accompany him outside the village for things like the Chunin exams, should any Leaf Ninja go on to the final exams, or if he personally goes to sign a treaty. In return for his employment, Naruto will receive the official rank of Jounin along with a weekly paycheck, not including whatever he earned for doing missions of his choice. The council also had no say over him, something that they both knew would piss them off to no end, as well as the part of his contract, stating that in no way could be forced to train or share his abilities with anyone he didn't want to. And that trying to steal from or spy on him will result in harsh punishment or even execution. Sarutobi also added on a small part stating that Naruto was immune to many of the rules concerning ninjas of Jounin rank. He didn't have to take a team to train for one, as it would conflict with his terms of employment, nor did he have to do the mandatory missions or duties that they had to do, as it would keep him from being his guard if needed. Another stipulation came in the form of seniority, as the Hokage had seen many instances where orders from two ninja of equal rank would clash, leaving their subordinates confused and unsure of what to do. To fix this, the seniority system came into place, where if two ninja of equal rank were sent on the same mission, the more experienced ninja was in charge. To stop that from happening, Sarutobi clearly wrote down that, while Naruto had the rank of a jounin, the blonde's authority would always outrank any other ninja besides his own when it came to the safety of the cage of the village. Naruto nodded and handed it back to let him sign and stamp it before signing it himself. Well, Naruto-kun, the Hokage started while looking over the finished contract. All that's left to do now is to arrange the test. Naruto smirked. Good, I can't wait to show off to the council. May I ask what to expect? Besides a test in all three types of jutsu, I'm sure you can expect a challenge from the Anbu captain who used to be my guard. Naruto hummed. Jealousy is most unbecoming of an Anbu captain, he said with a chuckle. I'll be looking forward to this challenge, but I'm strapped for cash, and I'm going to need some things. Would it be too troubling to ask you for an advance? Sarutobi lit his pipe. Of course not, Naruto-kun. I'd be more than happy to lend you some money. Besides, after your death, your weekly stipend continued to pile up for a while. I kept it locked up, so that no one would try to steal its sentimental value, and all. He opened his desk, and pulled out a metal locked box. Unlocking it, he pulled out a small dusty envelope, and handed it to the blonde. Naruto accepted it. Thanks, old man, I'll be seeing you around. Hiruzen nodded. Yes, I'll see you later, Naruto-kun. Oh, and I'll send someone to get you for the test, okay? The old man knocked his pipe with his knuckle, and used his kunai to scrape inside it. Hearing a groan, he looked up to see that Naruto was gone, and the three others were waking up, rubbing their heads, and looking around in confusion. Naruto walked through the village streets with his hood on. He really hadn't planned on joining the village, but it wasn't like he was on a tight schedule or anything, or that he really had a plan to follow anymore. His vengeance was complete. The 12 who had murdered him as a child were dead, and suffering in hell, as their souls were condemned by murdering an innocent child. Lucifer had told him that, as long as souls continued to flow into hell, he didn't care what he did. Not that he really needed to be up here. The world was full of sin and vice. As it was, sending him up here would just tip the balance to hell's favor. Maybe he did it as a way to mock heaven, who really knew what the devil he was thinking. The blonde turned towards a shop that advertised ninja stock and walked in. He had cashed the checks before and had a nice stack of cash on him. The weekly allowances he used to get were barely enough to pay any bills he had, not to mention that his landlord used to always overcharge him and then cut off his hot water just to spite him. Luckily, the bills were only once a month, and he had been able to save a little each week to pay the bitch. But now he didn't have to. He had at least 3 or 4 weeks worth of his old stipend folded up in his pocket, numbering up to 48,000 yen. In hell they didn't have currency, all you had was power, and the will to use it. You didn't need food in hell, being dead, and all, but the stronger demons enjoyed it from time to time. If they felt like they wanted something that you had, you'd better give it to them or be strong enough to keep it. 10 years in hell hadn't dulled his self-taught money management skills. As soon as the money had been counted out for him, his mind raced through all the things he knew to save a buck. He opened the door to the shop and saw that the cashier, a girl with brown hair styled into 2 buns, was asleep with her head on the counter. He could also hear someone working in the back of the building, but neither seemed to hear the bell ring above the door. Walking around, he ideally wondered if he could get away with just taking what he wanted. He had before. After all, he wanted Gar, so he just took her over and over again. He saw a few things that he could have just taken, but the thought of somehow getting caught went through his mind. While the odds seemed to be in his favor, there was always that chance. After all, getting caught stealing would make it hard for him in the long run, maybe even ruin his chances of getting into the highly respected and coveted position as the Hokage's bodyguard, something that he didn't want to fuck up. The blonde devil picked up some stuff, mainly the standard kunai and ninja star packs, as well as the pouches that went on his thigh. He also wanted to get him a weapon of some kind to use, especially after that fight with that angel. His claws were good and all, but it was a pain to heal himself, especially parts like his eyes. His healing factor could easily take care of cuts, bruises, and broken bones. All he had to do was reset it and return to the fight. But missing body parts were a bitch. He needed some time to heal those. His eye was a perfect example of that. The sword had almost completely ruined it, and all the complex parts had to be regrown. He found one. It was a special-made ninja sword forged with chakra-conductive metal. Sadly, it wasn't made to handle the intense pressure his chakra would put on it at full strength, but it would do. He'd just have to tone it down and push small amounts into it. He heard a small whimper and turned to see the girl behind the counter start fidgeting, twitching in her sleep and clenching her eyes. The blonde took a step closer and noticed that her fit seemed to worsen. Then he took a step away to see that she calmed down. Interesting, he thought while taking everything to the counter, watching as she seemed to cry and shiver. As he himself got closer, he realized that she was unconscious, sensing his true nature, and he too sensed what she truly was. He narrowed his eyes and reached out to crush her neck. She was a half-breed, a spawn between angels and humans. While they didn't pose a true threat to demonic beings, just like half-breeds between demons and humans didn't pose a threat to angelic beings, they were gifted with various abilities. Most usually had higher chakra pulls, some had higher brain functions, but there were a small few that were able to sense full demons or angels. As she cried in her sleep, he knew that her gift was underdeveloped. Had it been fully developed, she would have woken up long before now. The blonde grabbed her shoulder and shook it. There would be no use in killing the little half-breed. She couldn't pose a threat to him at all. She was too pathetic to kill. Wake up, he spoke in an even tone, making her wake up with a gasp, looking around like a frightened animal. Tenten had been sleeping peacefully. Her team usually trained early in the morning and stopped an hour or two before lunch. Today was no exception, so she was dead tired when she got back to her father's shop. At least they didn't have any missions today, sadly for her. That meant that she had to work the register while her dad worked the forges. She had sat there for a few minutes, eating a small snack while trying to stay awake. But after an hour she fell asleep while sitting on the stool behind the counter. It was some of the best sleep ever too, that was, until some strange feeling overcame her and turned her dreams into hellish nightmares. She had bad dreams before, but nothing like these. They were so real, depicting her team and father's murder at the hands of demons before they turned on her. Usually she could just clench her eyes and wake up, but it didn't work. Then someone shook her. Wake up, his voice seemed to boom, causing her to wake up, heart pounding harder than it would after a spar with Lee. She looked around and saw the blonde standing across from her with a blank face and blushed, mostly at getting caught dozing off on the job. Sorry, can I help you? She asked, trying to save what bit of dignity was left. Sadly for her, he gave her a look that basically called her stupid and looked down at the pile of supplies laying between them. With all but a shred of her already shattered dignity left, she wordlessly totaled his stuff. That'll be 9115 yen, she spoke, as he pulled the money from his pocket and counted it out. He took the equipment and walked out of the store. She might not have been a threat to him, but he still didn't like her. Kami and Shinigami both opened their eyes and frowned. They had been watching the boy to see what he was doing, but had lost him multiple times. One would think that they would be able to see him at all times like they could the humans, but somehow, the dark powers of hell were making it hard to keep him in their sight. So far they had watched him punish those responsible for his death, and while they were both horrified to see him kill an innocent teen, neither objected to seeing him have that preacher killed. While they knew that the blonde had set him up, then both knew of his previous sins. Dashi was a corrupt and foul man. While he seemed innocent, he had really molested children in the past and had been stealing from the church for years. The death god had found the way he died to be fitting and humorous, as did her sister to a lesser extent. Like Naruto, they too liked the concept of the saying an eye for an eye, just not to the extremes that he was willing to take it to. I fear the future may not be as peaceful as we had hoped for Night-chan, Yukiyu told her sister sadly. The death god nodded. Indeed, and from what we've seen, Kushina may have no chance against him should they ever face each other. Kami nodded. While the bond between mother and child is strong, the 9 months they spent together may not be strong enough to outweigh 6 years of torment or the 16 they spent apart. He may not even recognize her. Nai spoke out after a moment, and I fear that I may have a lot more work to do soon. The rumor mill around Konoha was abuzz with information, most of which was complete bullshit, things that teenage girls made up to get back at people and hurt them when they couldn't do anything physical. But for every 10 to 20 false rumors you heard, there was always one that proved to be true. One of which being that the Hokage was going to hire a new bodyguard. To those who knew about the large network of gossipers and how they functioned, it was a shock to see how quickly the rumor got out. Usually it took a few hours for something public and open to reach the ears of every nosy person, but something like this was supposed to be kept quiet. The power of gossip was not to be underestimated. Anbu researchers had often thought of ways to use such an effective communication system like that, but the ideas were usually thrown out due to lack of funding, and most rumors were sometimes twisted to the point where you had to pick it apart to find that one shred of truth. But the rumor seemed plausible. The Hokage had cancelled numerous meetings today and had summoned the council, who were surprisingly tight-lipped about the whole thing. Even the pink-haired gossip girl on the council, who would normally leak such juicy information, was silent as the grave, mostly because she was threatened, along with the rest of the council, that should they leak any information until it's declassified, they will be put into a grave. Ino Yamanaka, a 1-year genin, was a part of this circle. Even as a child she had effectively used this system to her advantage. At first it was to try and find out who liked who, then to find out what kind of girl Sasuke liked. After finding out that Sakura, her one-time best friend, also liked Sasuke, she had started to back off so that Sakura could have her chance. But before she could tell Sakura that, the pink-haired banshee broke off their friendship and did everything she could to make her look bad. Little did she know that since Ino actually came from a respected clan, her word was worth much more than a lowly merchant family. It hurt Ino to find out that Sakura had broken off their friendship over nothing at all, calling her a pig, and always trying to outdo her. Once the pain faded, anger replaced it. All those bullies that Ino protected Sakura from found that this was open game. Rumors about her being a slut floated from classroom to classroom, that the only reason she was at the top of her class was because she would do nasty things with her teachers. For Sakura, things got a lot tougher. Had it not been for her inner self, she would have been badly beaten numerous times, but her freaky inner self seemed to give her stronger punches, which scared most people into only calling her names. But all that aside, Ino was now listening to one of the girls visiting her family flower shop tell her about this guy who came into town. He seemed to come out of nowhere, and made Sasuke, whom she had lost her feelings for after seeing was a dick he was, look like a wimp. Apparently he had to be some dark god, wearing all black clothing under an equally black trench coat. At first she thought, emo alert, but the girl kept on, saying that his blonde hair, blue eyes, and dazzling smile had made her body quiver. She also said that from what she could see, he looked like he worked out, and had some nice muscles. She toned out the group of girls, and wondered if the man they were talking about was single or in ninja hell. A better question would be if he was going to stay in the village. Long-distance relationships usually didn't last. You never knew if they were seeing other people, never saw each other, and the only way to keep in contact was through letters. Oh my Kami, look, there he is. That knocked her out of her thoughts, and she looked at the girl, before looking to where she was pointing. He was at least 3 or 4 inches taller than her, but then again she wasn't the tallest girl ever. He was also everything she was told, and to sum it up, he was hot. A little too goth for her tastes, but who was she kidding? Her clothing was dark purple, and had it not been for the bandages around her chest, upper arms, and from her waist to her knees, she would have been branded a whore. As the girls trolled over him through the window, Ino noticed an Anbu approaching him, and saw something. Her father also walked out of the back room. Ino-chan, I have council business to deal with, so I'm leaving you and your mother here to watch the shop, okay? He asked while fixing the collar of his coat before noticing the group of giggling, gossiping girls. And if you girls are going to crowd my counter, then please help out some. Just because I put up a no loitering sign outside my door doesn't mean that you could come in and hang out. The girls sighed and groaned as one, yes Mr. Yamanaka. Inachi shook his head and walked out the door before they looked out the window again, only to groan again as the handsome guy was gone. He got away. A couple of the girls whined, I wonder who he is. Naruto appeared in the designated area where the Anbu had told him his test would be held. His hood covered his head, and the trench coat was zipped shut, hiding his identity to those who didn't already know who he was, as well as any weapons he had on him. After leaving the shop, Naruto had stopped at another place that sold clothing suitable for a ninja's daily rudeness. Using his money, he bought some black shinobi pants with some black sandals. Finding that the open-toed footwear was comfortable enough for him to wear instead of the closed-toed boots or dress shoes he usually wore. He also bought a fishless shirt and a blackish-gray vest similar to the vests that Jounin wore, only because it had a built-in sword strap that fit the weapon he purchased earlier. At least that was the reason at first. With his higher-than-normal temperature, Naruto had found that, like the sandals, he loved the way the vests let the cool air brush against his skin. Not only that, but keeping the vest open showed off his evil eye tattoo, along with the pentagram necklace he wore. He didn't have a problem letting people see them. Even humans with darker personalities like to wear things like that or have tattoos like this, especially hardcore death metal groups. As far as they knew, it was because he liked the music. He looked around and saw that he was standing just outside a large stadium, the Chunin exam area if memory serves. He walked in and followed his nose, the scent of Saratobi's pipe leading him up a few flights of stairs. He could also sense various sources of sin, mostly greed and lust mixed with gluttony and pride. As he reached the top, the blonde blended with the shadows and smirked at the gathering. It was easy to tell which side was which. The old man sat in the middle, ignoring a group of impatient civilians on one side, while another group of quieter, more poised men and women sat on the other side of him. They were obviously the shinobi clan heads, the group he would join, should he decide to continue his clan here. Hokage-sama, where is this person? We've been waiting forever, a rather large civilian huffed, while fanning himself with a paper fan. The fair-looking woman with 2 red fang tattoos on her face scoffed, it's only been 4 minutes. The civilian snorted, well, a good ninja should come when called. Naruto appeared behind the fat man and leaned next to his head. As if he knew what a true ninja should do, he spoke deeply, making the man yelp and fall out of his seat. How dare you? He gripped as he tried to stand back up. Naruto chuckled under his hood, the shadows of the hood covering his face. From the looks of things, I doubt that you are usually on time to meetings. A good little civilian should never antagonize someone who could kill them before they could blink. The man swallowed a lump in his throat. Was it a threat? Naruto shrugged. That depends on your definition of threat. A ninja is a person or persons who can compromise the success of a mission or cause harm to you or your unit. What I did was no threat in that sense, it was a simple bit of advice. The Shinobi Council chuckled at that, and decided right then that whoever this guy was alright by them. The Civilian Council had always been a pain in the ass to them, thinking that they knew better than them when it came to ninja matters. Naruto hummed and turned from the man, who glared at him, well red in the face, before turning to walk over to the Hokage, who was getting in his 7 chuckles, while puffing on his pipe. While Hokage-sama, Naruto started while popping his neck, was first. The aged man blew a smoke ring. First is the Taijutsu portion, Kai will be your opponent, he said while motioning to the man waiting down below. Naruto turned and jumped down to ground level where the man was waiting, with a large bright smile. Yosh, I cannot wait to test your flames of youth, he cheered in an overly excited tone. I am the gorgeous green beast of youth, might guy, who might you befriend? Naruto just stood there for a second, then turned to look up at the Hokage. You're fucking serious, ain't you? He asked. This is the person you have to test me in Taijutsu. Sir Toby chuckled. Yes, is there a problem with that? Naruto looked back to Guy, he smiled and waved, then back to the old man. No, but are you sure that those eyebrows don't count as another person? Everyone's sweat dropped. No, they don't. Fine. Naruto turned and got into his stance. I would recommend that you take off your coat, Guy said in his flamboyant tone. It will hinder your movement. Naruto hummed. I would recommend that you get on with it. I have other tests to take. The two councils watched as they circled each other. He's an arrogant bastard, ain't he? Sume asked from her seat with an interested look. Sir Toby nodded. Yes, and with good reason. Guy shot forward in a flash and yelled out the name of his attack, jumping up and bringing his leg up to do a heel drop, which, to his shock, Naruto caught. Twisting the man's leg, Naruto turned, swinging Guy around with him, before letting him go, and disappearing. The fat civilian smirked. Ha, look, he used ninjutsu, he's disqualified. Hiyashi Hyuga had his Byakuga bloodline active, and shook his head. No, there is no chakra in that technique, he spoke out, making them look at him in shock. So that means that it's pure physical power, Sume grinned, liking this guy more and more. Guy spun in the air, bouncing off the wall just in time for Naruto to appear, and punched his arm through the solid stone wall, all the way up to the shoulder. As Guy blinked, Naruto pulled his arm out, ripping more stone shards loose with his arm before popping his knuckles. Oh dear, I missed, he chuckled before disappearing again. Guy yelled out, as his body was propelled forward into the wall, Naruto having punched him in the middle of his back before disappearing again, and reappearing right behind him, grabbing a handful of his bowl cut. The blonde pulled Guy's head back, and slammed it forward multiple times before throwing him back, his body bouncing along the ground at the force, while blood poured from his nose. Guy stood up on shaky legs, his mind racing. For some reason he wasn't able to use his chakra to throw the man off of him, and get away. But before he could, the Hokage called for them to stop, not wanting the two to tear each other apart once they got pissed. Guy wasn't one to anger easily, but he didn't know about Naruto, besides he showed that he was capable enough in just those few moves. The civilians might not have seen it, but the whole time Naruto was throwing Guy around, and slamming him into the ground, the blonde would have easily killed the man. The Shinobi Council had noticed it. Guy nodded. You're pretty good, I hope to spar with you later, my youthful friend, he said while grabbing his bloody nose, and wiping the blood away. We shall see, Naruto stated, as the green man walked out of a side door to get his nose checked on, while another man's body flickered in, dressed in standard garb with white hair spiked to the side. His face was covered by a cloth mask, while his headband acted as an eye patch. Sorry I'm late, got lost on. Ears and cut him off. Nonsense, Kakashi, you're right on time. Kakashi eyes smile. Oh? Well, that's a first, he chuckled while reading his book, glancing at the headed man across from him. So you're the one I'm here to test in ninjutsu, huh? The white-haired scarecrow closed his book. I guess I need to be serious then. Naruto got ready, only to feel a kunai touch his neck. Looking out the corner of his eye, he saw Kakashi's arm, and felt him grab the back of his hood. Never let your guard down, the man chuckled while pulling the hood back, revealing the bright blonde spiky hair that only one man had. Naruto turned his head, and smirked, making Kakashi's one eye widen, as he saw the boy's bright blue eye. Sensei. The blonde grinned, showing off his sharp teeth. Never let your guard down. He turned, the blade cutting his throat slightly, before thrusting his palm into Kakashi's chest, channeling hellfire through his hand, as he did. To Kakashi, the palm thrust felt like a small tap at first, but a second later he was sent flying back, and into the wall. The shock had been so great, that he never even got the chance to think of substituting. Naruto chuckled darkly. You are wrong, Kakashi, Minato Namikaze is long since dead. The Shinigami took his soul, and devoured it. He unzipped his trench coat, and shrugged it off, tossing it aside. I am Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto. The reactions were that of shock, horror, amazement, and pure confusion. The civilians were shocked that the boy whom had been murdered all those years ago was still alive, horrified that he obviously knew of their hate, and that he was now very powerful. The Shinobi Council were also shocked that the boy who had supposedly died was still alive, amazed at his power, but confused as to how he was alive. Kakashi stood up, his eyes wide, and shocked. Naruto chuckled. What, you look like you've seen a ghost. Kakashi started to stutter out a comeback, but cried out suddenly, grabbing at the area where Naruto had hit him, only to realize that it was a smoldering hole which was nearly about to burn through his clothing under his vest. Ripping the vest off, he checked his chest to make sure he wasn't burning anywhere else, before looking at Naruto in wonder. Naruto held up his hand, showing him that steam was coming from his palm. Gaze upon the being whose veins course with flames, black as a moonless sky, dark as a starless night. He chanted before swiping his hand to Kakashi, saying, "Submit to the fiery blaze of hell." Kakashi leaped away just in time to avoid a spray of black flame, burning the grass and dirt beneath it, as well as scorching the stone walls. He lifted his headband and analyzed the blonde across from him, only to be forced to move as he appeared out of thin air by his side holding his hands to his mouth. Naruto breathed out, blowing a large spread of hellfire along the wall to the point where the stone melted. He stopped, but the flames continued to burn until he made a small sign with his hand, making the flames flicker and burn out, showing a smoldering log in his place. Interesting, he laughed, back to basics. Yatsudo no Jutsu, string reeling technique, Kakashi called out of nowhere. Thin metal wire appearing out of seemingly nowhere, and binding Naruto in place with his hands at his side. The blonde struggled, but the wires cut into his skin painfully. "How resourceful, Kakashi, I never even noticed you spreading out the wire," he said before smirking. Kakashi saw the smirk. "I wouldn't do anything. If I were you, those wires will keep getting tighter the more you struggle." Naruto grinned. "I see," he spoke before closing his eyes. Everyone around watched to see what he would do, and were amazed to see his whole body start to steam. The wires around him started glowing red to the point where Kakashi was forced to let go before it badly burned his fingers. With Kakashi no longer holding them, the wires fell uselessly to the ground, making Naruto grin. "You see the power I hold, you could say that it's my own will of fire," he said with a small snicker, "but I must say, I've never had such a resourceful person to test it on. Most would have burned to death by now under the might of my hellfire." Kakashi closed and opened his fist a few times. "It's just like the Uchiha's Amaterasu," he said, as he shook the pain away. Naruto shook his head. "No, the Amaterasu will for 7 days and nights, mine will burn until I stop it, or until there is nothing left to burn." Once again the Hokage stopped them. Kakashi left the ring, and a woman walked out of the door where Guy had left. She was a beautiful woman with dark raven hair and exotic ruby red eyes with a matching shade of lipstick. Her choice in clothing was interesting to say the least, a strangely made white dress with only one red sleeve on the right. Under it she wore fishnet that covered her cleavage, and bandages around her thighs and private areas, as well as on her forearms, knuckles, and ankles. Lastly was her red ankle-high sandals that looked like his own, which matched her black forehead protector. She wasted no time in flashing through a number of seals which caused her body to dissolve into a shower of flower petals. Naruto smirked as they fluttered in a non-existent breeze and surrounded him. "What beauty, it comes as no surprise that such a lovely flower like you would have such a..." He spoke while closing his eyes. Suddenly he lashed out, catching the woman by the neck and lifting her up, shattering the illusion around them, much to her and everyone else's shock. Kurenai dropped the kunai she had armed herself with and grabbed at his wrist, the pressure on her throat making it hard to breathe. "How?" she was able to gasp out while looking at him, as he kept his eyes closed. "Your scent gave it away," he said to their confusion. Anyone who knew about Kurenai's special name knew that it covered any scent she had. Only an Inuzuka with extremely well-trained noses were able to pick up her scent when she used that. Naruto opened his eyes and looked her dead in the eye. "I know what you're thinking, and no, I don't smell your physical scent, I can smell your pride. It borders on arrogance. You feel that none would surpass you, but sadly like art, it's nothing but an illusion." He turned to face her completely. "Let me show you a true glimpse into hell." A dark pulse seemed to pass through her, she felt numb, and lost all feeling in her body. Darkness consumed her, she fell, and fell before flames consumed her. She found herself standing nude on an island surrounded by lava, but between her and the molten earth was a ring of various demons. They all looked at her with lust in their eyes before lunging at her, trying to be the first to rape her. But before her body was defiled, her eyes cleared, and she found herself staring into a pair of blue eyes with her red ones. Naruto dropped her, and she sank to her knees, breathing hard because of the fear that the blonde had caused her. "Arrogance and pride always leads to defeat. That has always been the folly of humans," he said in a flat voice. "The tests are over. Should this continue, I will be forced to destroy her mind. My techniques are geared towards completely shattering a target's mind or severely crippling them, and she has done nothing to warrant such punishment." An Anbu body flickered in. "I challenge you, you have no right taking my position as Hokage-sama's bodyguard." Thanks for watching my video. Leave a like if you enjoyed my video, and also do consider subscribing to my channel for more awesome content. See you next time. Till then, sayonara.